Welcome. Tonight, we begin a longer journey, a quiet journey through the history of Japanese music, from its earliest origins in forests and rituals to the sounds that now travel across the world. This is not a story to be rushed. There is no need to remember everything, no need to follow every detail. Instead, simply listen. Let the sounds, the stories, and the atmosphere gently carry you forward. This journey begins in a time before written music, before instruments were shaped with precision, when sound was not something performed, but something experienced. The wind through trees, water moving over stone, voices rising quietly within sacred spaces. From these beginnings, music in Japan slowly took form. Across centuries, it changed, it adapted, it blended with new ideas, and yet something subtle remained, a sense of space, a sense of stillness, a quiet balance between sound and silence. As you listen tonight, you will move through many different moments, ancient rituals, court music, the influence of distant cultures, the emergence of modern sounds, city lights, digital worlds, and everything in between. Each chapter flows into the next, not as separate stories, but as one continuous movement, like a single piece of music that never truly ends. If at any point you feel yourself drifting, that is perfectly fine. This video is designed for rest, for calm, for sleep. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. Just listen and allow yourself to relax. And now we return to the beginning, to a quiet place, far from cities, far from noise, where music was not yet music, but something deeper, something closer to the natural world. Let us begin. Tonight, we step back and begin again, not with a single note, but with an entire journey. From the quiet breath of ancient forests, where music first rose like mist, through sacred trees, to the refined stillness of imperial courts, to the disciplined silence of Zen temples, and then into the lantern-lit streets of Edo, where stories sang through shamisen strings, into open fields, where voices carried across mountains and sea, and finally to the edge of a changing world, where new sounds arrived from distant shores. This is the complete first chapter of Japan's musical story, a story of ritual, of community, of silence and celebration, of preservation and transformation. So settle in, let the world grow quiet, and drift through centuries of sound, slowly unfolding, one breath at a time. Part 1. The Sacred Origins of Japanese Music. Welcome. Tonight, we begin a slow journey through the history of Japanese music, not as a fast lecture and not as a list of dates, but as a quiet, unfolding story. A story that begins long before cities, before concert halls, before pop songs and digital sound. It begins in forests, in wind, in ritual. Long before Japan became a modern nation, music already existed as something sacred. In early Shinto belief, sound was not entertainment. It was a bridge between the human world and the world of the spirits, known as kami. In small wooden shrines, often surrounded by tall cedar trees, priests and shrine maidens performed rituals called kagura. Kagura was not loud, it was not dramatic. It was deliberate. Slow drums echoed like distant footsteps. Flutes carried thin, airy tones into the sky. The movements were careful, measured. Each sound had intention. Music at this time was an offering. It was meant to invite the divine into the present moment. If you imagine ancient Japan, try not to imagine large cities. Instead, picture mist, forests stretching for miles, wooden structures lit by firelight. In that quiet world, music did not compete with noise. It blended with nature. Wind through leaves, water moving across stones. The boundary between music and environment was almost invisible. Over time, these sacred sounds began to evolve. As political structures formed and an imperial court was established, music entered a new space. This was the birth of gagaku. Gagaku means elegant music. It became the official music of the Japanese imperial court. And remarkably, it is still performed today. Gagaku is considered one of the oldest continuously performed orchestral traditions in the world. Its sound is unlike Western classical music. There is no rush, no dramatic crescendo. Instead, tones stretch outward, as if time itself has slowed down. One instrument, called the sho, produces soft, sustained chords that feel almost like breathing. Another, the hichiriki, creates a piercing, reedy melody that moves gently but with deep emotion. And beneath it all, drums mark the passage of time in calm, spacious rhythms. Listening to gagaku can feel like standing inside history. The music does not push forward. It hovers. It invites patience. During this same era, Buddhism arrived in Japan. From China and Korea, with it came a new form of sacred sound, Buddhist chanting. Monks recited sutras in low, resonant voices. The chants were steady, repetitive, hypnotic. The goal was not performance, it was focus. Breath aligning with syllables, mind aligning with sound. In many ways, this chanting tradition shaped Japan's relationship with repetition in music. Repetition not as boredom, but as meditation. As centuries passed, Japan entered the medieval period. Warrior clans rose to power. The samurai class emerged, and with them came new artistic forms. One of the most important was biwa hoshi, storytelling. Blind musicians traveled from town to town, playing the biwa, a short-necked lute, while reciting epic tales of war and loyalty. The most famous story was the tale of the heike. These performances were emotional, yet controlled. The biwa's sharp-plucked notes created tension. The voice carried sorrow. Even in stories of battle, there was restraint. Japanese musical aesthetics often favored subtlety over spectacle. Silence became as important as sound. This concept, known as ma, refers to the space between moments, the pause, the breath, the stillness that gives shape to everything around it. Without silence, music has no form. And in Japan, this idea became foundational. By the 14th century, another art form emerged. No theater. No combined music, poetry, dance, and drama. Its stage was simple. Its movements were slow. The music featured drums, a flute, and chanting voices. But again, the pacing was deliberate, almost dreamlike. No performances were not meant to overwhelm the audience. They were meant to suspend time, to create an atmosphere where emotion lingered quietly instead of exploding outward. If Western opera is powerful and expansive, No is minimal and inward. Both are expressive, but in very different ways. As we move through these early centuries, a pattern begins to appear. Japanese music developed with deep respect for nature, ritual, and emotional subtlety. Volume was rarely the focus. Instead, attention was placed on texture, on breath, on the feeling between notes. This foundation would influence every era that followed. Even modern Japanese pop music, centuries later, still carries echoes of these early traditions. But for now, we remain in the ancient world, a world of wooden temples, court musicians in silk robes, traveling storytellers under open skies, music not as industry, not as product, but as atmosphere, as spiritual connection, as shared memory. And as we slowly close this first chapter, The History of Japanese Music, Part 2. From the Heian Court to the Rise of the Samurai. Tonight, we continue our quiet journey through the history of Japanese music. In the first part, we explored the sacred beginnings, the sounds of Shinto ritual, early court traditions, and the slow shaping of a musical identity. Now we move forward into a new era, an era of elegance, refinement, and subtle beauty. This is the Heian period. The Heian period began in the year 794. Japan's capital was moved to Heian-kyo, the city we now call Kyoto. For nearly 4 centuries, this city became the center of culture, poetry, and art. And music flourished quietly within the walls of the imperial court. Life in the Heian court moved slowly. Aristocrats wore layered silk robes. They wrote poetry by moonlight. They listened to the soft rustle of wind through bamboo. Music was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was restrained, delicate, intentional. Gagaku continued to evolve. During this time, it became more refined, more structured. The musicians of the imperial court trained carefully to preserve its form. Instruments like the sho, a small mouth organ, created soft clusters of harmony. The hichiriki carried a piercing, emotional tone. And the biwa, a short-necked lute, added gentle rhythm to the air. The music was slow. Notes were held longer than expected. Silence was just as important as sound. This concept that silence has meaning would become a defining characteristic of Japanese art. Outside the court, another musical world was beginning to form, a more grounded one, a more human one. By the late Heian period, political power was slowly shifting. The elegant aristocrats were losing influence. Warrior clans were rising. The samurai were beginning to shape the future of Japan, and with them, a new type of storytelling emerged. The biwa took on a different role. Traveling monks, known as biwa hoshi, began to recite epic tales while playing the instrument. Their most famous story was the tale of the Heike. It told of war, loss, impermanence, the fall, of powerful families, the fragility of human life. The chanting style was rhythmic but flexible, half spoken, half sung. The voice rose and fell like waves. The biwa punctuated the story with sharp, deliberate notes. These performances were not entertainment in the modern sense. They were meditation, a reminder that all things must pass. This idea, impermanence, is deeply connected to Buddhism, and Buddhism was becoming increasingly influential during this era. Buddhist chanting, known as shomyo, developed into a highly disciplined art. Monks would chant sutras in long sustained tones. The rhythm followed breath. The melody followed devotion. There were no instruments, only the human voice, layered, resonant, calm. In temples, these chants echoed softly against wooden walls. In candlelight, sound seemed to float. Music was no longer only for courts or warriors. It became a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. As Japan moved into the Kamakura period, in the late 12th century, the samurai class fully took control. The atmosphere changed. It became more disciplined, more austere. Music followed this shift. It grew simpler, stronger, more direct. Court elegance did not disappear, but it no longer stood alone. Now, music reflected both refinement and resilience, grace and strength, silence and steel. This blending of influences laid the foundation for future traditions. No theater would soon emerge. Zen philosophy would deepen the appreciation of minimalism and the idea that beauty exists in simplicity would shape Japanese music for centuries. As we rest here at the edge of the medieval world, we can feel the transformation from sacred ritual to court elegance, from aristocratic refinement to warrior storytelling. Japanese music was not static. It moved with the rhythm of history itself. In the next part, we will explore how theatrical performance, Zen philosophy, and the early modern era further transformed Japan's soundscape. For now, let your thoughts slow. Imagine Kyoto under a quiet night sky, the distant echo of a biwa, the soft breath of a temple chant, and the steady passage of time. Rest here and drift into the continuing story. The History of Japanese Music, Part 3. No, Zen and the Sound of Silence. Tonight, we continue our quiet journey through the history of Japanese music. So far, we have moved from sacred ritual to court elegance, from aristocratic refinement to the rise of the samurai. Now we enter a world of stillness, a world where silence is not empty, but alive. The 14th century marked a turning point. Japan was no longer ruled by court nobles. The warrior class had taken control. And with this shift came a new artistic expression, one that blended discipline, spirituality, and performance. This was the birth of No theater. No was not loud. It was not fast. It did not seek to overwhelm. Instead, it invited the audience to slow down, to observe, to listen carefully. The stage was simple: a wooden platform, a painted pine tree. At the back, few props, few movements. Everything was deliberate, measured, restrained. Music in No was essential, but it never dominated. It supported. It breathed with the actors. The musical ensemble was small: a flute called the nokan, and 3 drums, the kotsuzumi held at the shoulder, the otsuzumi held at the hip, and sometimes a larger drum called the taiko, the flute, pierced the air with a sharp, almost haunting tone. The drums did not create steady rhythm, as in Western music. Instead, they followed breath. They followed emotion. They followed tension. Between sounds, there was space, long pauses, moments where nothing happened, and yet everything happened. This concept is known in Japan as ma. Ma is the space between things, the silence between notes, the pause between movements, the stillness between breaths. In No, ma is everything. Without silence, sound has no meaning. Without emptiness, form has no shape. Zen Buddhism deeply influenced this way of thinking. Zen teaches that truth is found not in excess, but in simplicity, not in noise, but in quiet awareness. As Zen spread among the samurai class, it shaped their aesthetics. Their gardens became minimal. Their poetry became concise. Their tea ceremonies became rituals of precision, and their music followed the same path. No chanting was controlled. and restrained. The voice did not rise dramatically. It hovered. It lingered. It moved slowly through tonal patterns that felt timeless. To modern ears, no music may feel unfamiliar, even distant, but that distance is intentional. It creates reflection. It creates space for thought. During this same era, another instrument began to grow in importance, the shakuhachi, a simple bamboo flute with 5 finger holes. Nothing ornate, nothing decorative, just bamboo, breath, and air. The shakuhachi became associated with Zen monks known as komuso. These monks used the flute as a form of meditation. They called it suizen, blowing meditation. Each note was not merely played, it was breathed. The sound was fragile, sometimes airy, sometimes broken, sometimes almost silent. Imperfection was not a flaw. It was the point. Zen aesthetics embrace the imperfect, the incomplete, the fleeting. This idea is known as wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi finds beauty in weathered wood, in fading leaves, in quiet sounds that do not last. Music became less about performance and more about presence. As Japan moved into the Muromachi period, these ideas continued to deepen. Article was no longer about display. It was about atmosphere, about mood, about subtlety. Music did not demand attention. It invited contemplation. By the time the Edo period approached, Japan had developed a unique musical identity, one shaped by Shinto spirituality, court refinement, warrior discipline, Zen minimalism, and a profound respect for silence. When we listen to traditional Japanese music today, we can still hear these layers, the sacred echo of ancient ritual, the elegance of court harmony, the solemn rhythm of warrior tales, and the quiet breath of Zen bamboo. In the next part, we will step into the vibrant world of the Edo period, a time when cities expanded, when merchants flourished, when new instruments filled the streets and music became part of everyday life. For now, imagine a wooden stage under lantern light, a masked actor moving slowly, a single flute note cutting through silence and the space between sounds, stretching endlessly. Rest there, let the silence settle gently and drift into the next chapter of Japan's musical story. Part 4. The Sound of the City. Music in Edo, Japan. After centuries of silence, of ritual breath, of courtly elegance, and disciplined stillness, a different sound began to rise, not from forest shrines, not from imperial halls, but from the city, from Edo, a place of lantern light, crowded bridges, wooden houses leaning close together, and footsteps echoing long after sunset. Here, music no longer belonged only to gods, or nobles, or monks. It belonged to the people, and it was alive. Edo was vast. By the 18th century, it was one of the largest cities in the world. Samurai walked its wide avenues. Merchants filled its markets. Artisans carved, stitched, printed, built. And when the day's work ended, another world awakened. A world of sound. Listen carefully. You might hear it. The sharp pluck of a shamisen string. Bright, immediate, almost percussive. The shamisen was not delicate like the court instruments. It was direct, wood, silk, and skin. A sound that carried through narrow streets and behind paper screens. It became the heartbeat of urban music. Inside small wooden theaters, stories unfolded beneath warm lantern light. Kabuki. Bold, expressive, dramatic. Actors moved with exaggerated gestures, their voices rising and falling like waves. Behind them, musicians followed every motion. The shamisen guided the rhythm. Drums punctuated emotion. Flutes traced tension in the air. Music and movement were inseparable. One breath, one pulse. In quieter corners of the city, another form took shape. Joruri, narrative chanting, where a single voice told epic tales of love, loyalty, and tragic resolve. The chanter's voice stretched long and low, then sudden and sharp. Beside him, the shamisen responded, never overpowering, always conversing. It was not background music, it was partnership. Voice and string, story and silence. Unlike the stillness of Zen, Edo's music embraced contrast. Laughter, applause, gasps, the shuffle of wooden sandals, children whispering, vendors calling from distant streets. The city itself became part of the performance. Nothing was entirely quiet, and yet, within that liveliness, there was structure, refinement, discipline, even the most playful melody followed patterns carefully shaped over time. The merchant class, once considered socially lower than the samurai, now held growing cultural power. They commissioned performances, collected instruments, memorized popular melodies. Music became fashion. A tune heard in one district would travel quickly to another, shared, adapted, transformed. The sound of Edo was never fixed. It moved, just like the river that ran through it. At night, lanterns reflected in dark canals. Inside tea houses, soft music drifted between conversations. The shamisen could whisper, not only shout. Its quieter tones carried intimacy. A private performance in a small room with only a few listeners. Music was no longer distant. It was close, personal, human. And yet, even in this lively era, the past remained. Ancient scales still echoed faintly. Rhythms carried memories of temple bells and court dances. Nothing was entirely new. Each generation reshaped what came before. Edo did not replace tradition. It layered upon it. Over time, musical guilds formed. Training became formalized. Apprentices sat for hours, fingers repeating the same passage again and again. Precision mattered. Control mattered. But so did emotion. A slight pause before a phrase, a stronger strike on a single string. The smallest shift could change everything. If you close your eyes, you can almost stand in that city. A distant drumbeat, a sudden cheer, a single shamisen phrase rising above it all, alive, vibrant, imperfect, human. Edo's music was not seeking enlightenment. It was not striving for sacred purity. It was telling stories about ordinary lives, about fleeting pleasures, about love found and lost. In that way, it carried a different kind of truth. Not the silence of mountains, but the warmth of shared experience. And slowly, almost without anyone noticing, these urban sounds began to travel beyond Edo, across provinces, into villages. They mingled with regional songs, folk melodies, festival rhythms. The boundaries blurred. City and countryside began to listen to one another. The world, however, was changing. Ships from distant lands would soon appear on the horizon. New instruments, new scales, new harmonies. But for now, Edo breathed in its own rhythm, self-contained, layered, restless, alive. So rest here for a moment, in the lantern glow, in the hum of conversation, in the bright strike of a shamisen string, cutting through the night air. Let the city settle around you. Let its sounds soften. And notice, even within its energy, there are spaces between notes, between footsteps, between heartbeats. The music of Edo was never only noise, it was balance, movement and pause, sound and space. And in that balance, Japan's musical story continued to unfold gently forward. Part 5. Folk Songs and Festivals, the Voices of the People. After the lantern glow of Edo, after the theaters, after the polished strings of the shamisen, another sound begins to surface. It does not rise from the city. It does not belong to the stage. It comes from open fields, from fishing boats, from mountain paths, from hands that work and voices that carry across distance. This is the music of the people. Long before written scores, before formal training, before audiences gathered in silence, there were songs, simple, repetitive, passed from one voice to another, a melody remembered, not because it was complex, but because it felt familiar. These were work songs, field songs, boat songs, lullabies whispered at dusk. They did not seek applause. They were woven into daily life. Imagine a rice field at harvest, the sun still high, feet pressing into wet earth, hands cutting stalks in rhythm. A voice begins to sing, low at first. Then another joins, call and response, back and forth. The melody keeps time. It eases fatigue. It turns labor into shared movement. Music here is not performance. It is cooperation, breath aligned, effort synchronized. Along the northern coasts, fishermen sang as they pulled heavy nets from the sea. The ocean answered with wind and spray. The song had to be strong, clear, carried above waves. These melodies were shaped by necessity, long vowels, strong rhythm, minimal ornament. The sea did not allow softness, and so the music grew bold. In mountain villages, echoes traveled differently. Songs curved around valleys, lingered in cold air. Here, melodies stretched slowly, notes sustained, silence lingering between phrases. Even within folk traditions, the landscape shaped the sound. Geography became composer. Festivals brought another layer. Seasonal rituals marking planting, harvest, summer heat, winter cold. Villages gathered. Drums appeared. Large, deep taiko resonating through wooden streets. The rhythm steady, grounded, almost primal. Feet moved, bodies swayed. Children watched. Elders clapped. The entire community entered the circle. Bon Odori, a dance honoring ancestors. Lanterns hung in the warm night air, drums echoing from a raised platform. Movements simple, repeated, accessible to all. No audience, no performers, only participation. Music here dissolves boundaries. Everyone belongs. Unlike court music, folk songs were rarely written down. They shifted over time. A lyric changed. A rhythm adapted. A melody shortened. No single version was final. Ownership was collective. The song belonged to whoever carried it. This fluidity kept the music alive. It breathed. It evolved without announcement. And yet, these humble songs carried deep emotion, longing for a distant lover, grief for a lost parent, hope for a good harvest. The themes were universal, but the expression was intimate, unpolished, direct, sometimes playful, sometimes raw. There was no distance between singer and feeling. In the South, island rhythms developed their own flavor. Different scales, different vocal textures, warmer, more ornamented. Travelers carried fragments from one region to another. Trade routes became musical bridges. What began as a local tune might slowly transform as it journeyed across provinces. Japan's musical landscape became layered, regional, textured. In this era, music did not require permission. It did not wait for formal stages. It existed in kitchens, in fields, on docks, under open skies. Children learned by listening, by repeating, by participating. Technique was absorbed naturally. The body understood before the mind did. There is something deeply human in a song that everyone knows, a melody that requires no introduction. When the first note begins, others instinctively follow. Harmony emerges not from theory, but from familiarity, from shared memory. Folk music thrives in this space, between individuals, within community, and still, echoes of the city remained. Shamisen melodies found their way into rural festivals. Urban tunes were simplified, adapted, absorbed. Likewise, rural rhythms traveled toward Edo. Professional musicians listened, borrowed, refined. The boundary between folk and urban was never rigid. It was porous. Music moved freely. As the 19th century approached, change began to gather quietly. Whispers of distant ships, foreign instruments, new tonal systems waiting at the edge of the horizon. But in villages, in small towns, in mountain paths and coastal harbors, the songs continued, unaffected for the moment. They carried history without realizing it. They preserved identity through repetition. They marked time through rhythm. Close your eyes now. Imagine standing in a summer festival, lanterns above you, drums steady in your chest, voices rising together, not perfectly in tune, but perfectly aligned in spirit. Feel how the rhythm settles into your body, how the melody repeats gently, almost hypnotic. This is not music to analyze. It is music to join. In these shared songs, Japan's musical story expands outward, from temples to courts, from cities to villages, from structured compositions to living tradition. The sacred did not disappear. It simply changed form. It moved into everyday life, into laughter, into sweat, into dance. Rest here for a moment, in the warmth of shared voices, in the steady pulse of drums beneath open sky. Notice how repetition becomes comfort, how familiarity becomes belonging. Let the rhythm soften. Let the crowd dissolve into quiet. And listen for the subtle shift approaching on the horizon. A new sound from distant shores will soon arrive, but for now, the voices of the people continue, simple, enduring, alive. Part 6. The edge of modernity when new sounds arrived. There is a moment just before change becomes visible, when the air feels different, not louder, not brighter, just unsettled. By the mid-19th century, Japan stood in such a moment. For centuries, its musical world had grown inward, layer upon layer. Temple, court, city, village, tradition had deepened, refined, repeated. But now, something unfamiliar hovered at the horizon. In coastal towns, rumors traveled faster than ships. Strange vessels had been seen, black hulls, foreign flags, unfamiliar faces. With them came instruments never heard before, metal strings tuned differently, keys arranged in straight lines, brass that shimmered in sunlight. These sounds did not belong to temple courtyards or lantern-lit festivals. They came from somewhere else. At first, the two worlds did not mix. Western military bands played for diplomats, formal, structured, marching in steady rhythm. The sound was bold, layered, harmonized in ways unfamiliar to Japanese ears. Multiple notes sounding at once, not weaving gently, but stacking vertically. It felt architectural, solid, direct. For musicians raised on pentatonic scales, this harmony felt almost overwhelming. Where was the space between notes? Where was the lingering breath? Where was the quiet curve of a sustained tone? Yet curiosity stirred. Young listeners leaned closer. Something about the fullness of the sound sparked intrigue, not rejection, not yet acceptance, but interest. The shamisen did not disappear. The taiko did not fall silent. Folk songs continued. Festivals returned each season, but slowly, carefully, new textures began to appear. A school teacher introducing Western melodies to children, a government official encouraging modernization, a piano placed in a newly built hall, at first awkward, foreign, out of place, then gradually less so. Music became part of transformation. Japan was not only opening its ports, it was reshaping its identity. Uniforms changed, architecture shifted, and sound, always sound, reflected that shift. Military bands grew more common. Western notation entered classrooms. Young composers studied abroad. They listened, absorbed, adapted. But something important happened. Western music was not simply copied. It was interpreted, filtered, rebalanced. Traditional scales blended with harmonic structure. Japanese aesthetics of restraint met European systems of expansion. Silence met symphony. Breath met brass. The result was not replacement. It was conversation. Imagine a small concert hall in early Meiji Japan. Wooden beams overhead, rows of listeners seated quietly. On stage, a pianist plays a Western melody, but the phrasing, the pacing, carries something distinctly Japanese. Slight hesitation before resolution, gentle restraint. Even in adoption, identity remains. For centuries, Japan's music had unfolded like a scroll, horizontal, flowing. Now, vertical harmony entered the picture. Chords stacked, layers rising. Yet the older sensibility never vanished. The appreciation for space, for Ma, the meaningful pause. It persisted, even inside orchestras, even inside new forms. The late 19th century did not erase what came before. It expanded it. No continued. Kabuki thrived. Folk festivals endured. At the same time, concert halls emerged. Composers experimented. A new generation stood between worlds, listening both backward and forward. Change rarely arrives with a single sound. It accumulates gradually until one day, what was once unfamiliar feels natural. The piano no longer feels foreign. The march no longer feels distant. And yet, the echo of temple bells still resonates. The steady rhythm of taiko still grounds the earth. The shamisen still sings. Modernity does not silence tradition. It reframes it. If you listen closely, you can hear the overlap. A festival drum in one district, a military brass rehearsal in another, a child practicing scales on a piano, while a grandmother hums an old folk tune in the next room. Two eras sharing air, not competing, coexisting. And in that coexistence, Japan's musical story enters a new chapter, not defined by purity, not defined by isolation, but by synthesis, by the ability to absorb, to reshape, to remain rooted while reaching outward. Rest here for a moment, at the edge of change. Feel the subtle tension between old wood and polished brass, between breath and harmony, between repetition and expansion. Notice how nothing truly disappears. It transforms softly, gradually, like waves reshaping a shoreline. Japan's music does not end here. It continues into recording studios, into radio waves, into global stages. But that is a story for another night. For now, let the overlapping sounds settle. Let the old and new coexist in quiet balance and drift gently into the next chapter. Tonight, we continue our journey through the evolving sound of Japan. In the previous chapter, we explored the ancient roots of Japanese music, from sacred ritual and court performance to the refined traditions of the Edo period. But history does not stand still. As the 19th century drew to a close, Japan opened its doors to the wider world. New instruments arrived, new musical systems were studied, and slowly a new generation began to reshape the nation's sound. Western harmony met Japanese sensibility. Radio waves carried music into homes across the country. Cities developed their own rhythms. And eventually, Japanese music began to travel beyond its borders. From the arrival of Western bands to the polished glow of city pop, this chapter tells the story of how Japan's musical identity transformed in the modern age. So, settle in. Let the lights dim and the night grow quiet, and drift with us through the sounds of a changing Japan. Part 7. The opening of Japan, Western sound arrives, and so the old and the new stood side by side. Temple bells still echoed, shamisen strings still sang, but beyond the horizon another sound was drawing closer, not yet fully heard, not yet fully understood, just approaching. In the middle of the 19th century, Japan had lived for centuries in relative isolation. Its music had grown inward, refined, layered, deeply rooted in its own aesthetic logic. Silence was meaningful. Space was sacred. Melody moved horizontally like a brushstroke across paper. But the sea does not remain silent forever. And in 1853, black ships appeared on the horizon. They came not only with trade agreements and diplomatic pressure. They came with brass, with drums arranged in formation, with marching rhythms that moved not in curves, but in straight lines. Western military bands performed on deck and on shore. Trumpets cut sharply through the air. Snare drums snapped with mechanical precision. Harmony stacked upward, note upon note, forming structures unfamiliar to Japanese ears. For those listening, the experience must have felt overwhelming. Where was the pause? Where was the lingering breath between tones? Where was the subtle bend of a note, searching gently for resolution? Western harmony did not drift. It advanced, confident, layered, full. It filled space that Japanese music had long allowed to remain open. And yet, curiosity stirred. Some listeners leaned closer, not in rejection, but in wonder. The sheer weight of the sound, multiple voices moving at once, suggested a different way of organizing emotion. Not quieter, not louder, just different. As treaties were signed and ports were opened, Western instruments began to appear on land. Clarinets, cornets, pianos carefully unloaded from ships, each one carrying not only a sound, but a system, notation, scales, rules of progression. Music was no longer only transmitted by memory. It could be written, standardized, replicated precisely. This concept alone marked a turning point. In the early years, the two musical worlds remained separate. Western bands performed for official ceremonies, diplomatic gatherings, military demonstrations. Traditional musicians continued their art in theaters, in temples, in festivals. the sounds did not yet blend. They coexisted, like two languages spoken in the same city, but rarely in the same sentence. Then came the Meiji Restoration, a moment of deliberate transformation. Japan did not simply react to the West, it studied it systematically. Education was restructured, uniforms redesigned, architecture reimagined, and music became part of that reform. Western music was introduced into schools. Military training adopted European band traditions. Young students learned to read notation, to sing in unison, to follow a conductor's raised hand. For children accustomed to folk melodies and temple chants, this new music must have felt disciplined, linear, structured in ways unfamiliar. Yet, repetition breeds familiarity, and soon Western tonal systems began to feel less foreign. The piano's keys, once mysterious, became approachable, predictable, even comforting. Still, the transformation was not one of erasure. Traditional scales did not vanish. Folk festivals continued. The shamisen did not fall silent. Instead, a slow process began. A quiet negotiation between worlds. Japanese musicians listened carefully. They asked, what can be adopted? What must remain? How can something foreign become something meaningful? It is easy to imagine change as abrupt, but cultural transformation is rarely sudden. It seeps gradually into classrooms, into military parades, into private homes where a single piano stands near sliding paper doors, at first awkward, then natural. Consider the contrast. A no performance, measured, deliberate, rooted in centuries of stillness, and nearby, a Western march, brisk, energetic, forward-moving, two different conceptions of time, two different relationships to silence, yet both capable of stirring emotion, both capable of discipline, both capable of beauty. As decades passed, the boundary softened. Japanese composers would soon attempt something unprecedented, to write in Western forms, yet infuse them with Japanese sensibility. But that is a story unfolding in the next chapter. For now, we remain at the threshold, at the moment when exposure becomes curiosity, when curiosity becomes study, when study becomes transformation. Close your eyes. Imagine a quiet harbor at dusk, traditional wooden buildings lining the shore, a distant temple bell fading into evening air, and then, faintly, a brass instrument testing its tone, a single sustained note, steady and unwavering, not bending, not drifting, just present. Two sonic worlds sharing the same horizon, not yet merged, not yet reconciled, but listening to one another. Rest here in that delicate balance between preservation and possibility, between the familiar cadence of temple drums and the structured advance of marching feet. The opening of Japan was not only political, it was acoustic, a widening of the ear, and once a culture begins to listen differently, its future begins to change gently, inevitably. And so the story continues, not in conflict, but in conversation. Part 8. School Songs and Military Bands. The conversation had begun, not in loud debate, but in careful listening. Temple bells still rang at dusk. Shamisen strings still trembled in quiet rooms. But now, another rhythm was learning to march across the same soil. In the early years of the Meiji era, change was no longer distant. It was deliberate. Japan did not merely hear Western sound. It studied it, systematically, carefully, with intention. Music entered classrooms, not as entertainment, but as education. Children gathered in wooden schoolhouses, their voices rising together in melodies newly written, songs with clear harmony, clear rhythm, clear direction. Unlike the free-flowing patterns of folk music, these songs moved forward with purpose, line by line, measure by measure. For many students, this was their first encounter with written notation, black marks on white paper, symbols representing pitch and duration. Music no longer lived only in memory. It could be read, corrected, repeated, precisely. This shift was subtle, but profound. At the same time, military bands became a visible symbol of modernization. Uniformed musicians marched in formation, brass instruments gleaming in sunlight. Snare drums set the pace, each step synchronized, each note aligned. Sound became structure. Music became discipline. Where traditional Japanese music often embraced flexible tempo, breathing with the performer, military band music demanded precision, no lingering, no drifting. The downbeat was firm, collective, unquestioned. For a nation reshaping itself, this kind of sound carried meaning. Imagine a parade ground at twilight, boots moving in unison, trumpets cutting clean arcs of sound into the evening air. Behind them, wooden houses and paper lanterns, watching quietly, old and new, standing within the same frame, not yet blended, but undeniably connected. School songs, too, carried more than melody. They carried values, unity, order, progress. Children sang together, their individual voices merging into a single harmonic line. In that merging, a new cultural sound began to form. Not fully Western, not fully traditional, something in between. And yet, tradition did not disappear. Festivals continued. Temple drums echoed during summer nights. The shamisen still accompanied storytellers. The difference was this: Western sound was no longer a visitor. It had become part of daily life. The piano found its place in middle-class homes, often positioned near a window, sunlight falling across polished keys. At first, the instrument seemed foreign, heavy, angular, precise. But children learned quickly. Scales repeated, exercises practiced. Familiarity softened resistance. Music teachers played a quiet but crucial role. Many had studied abroad. Others learned from foreign instructors. They adapted Western curriculum to Japanese classrooms, sometimes translating lyrics, sometimes adjusting melodic phrasing. The process was not blind imitation. It was careful selection, adoption without surrender. There is something deeply human about learning through repetition. Voices rising together each morning, simple harmonies, predictable cadence. Over time, what once felt unfamiliar begins to feel natural, and what feels natural begins to shape identity. By the late 19th century, an entire generation had grown up with this dual inheritance. They knew the sound of temple bells. They also knew the sound of brass fanfares. They understood pentatonic scales. They also understood major and minor keys. Their ears had widened, and widened ears create new possibilities. But not all transitions are smooth. Some critics worried that Western music might overshadow tradition. Others believed it was essential for national strength. Debate unfolded quietly, not always in public speeches, but in practice rooms and rehearsal halls. Should music preserve the past or prepare the future. Perhaps it could do both. As evening settles, imagine a small town square. A military band rehearsal concludes. The final note lingers, precise and resonant. In the distance, a temple drum responds, slower, deeper, anchored in centuries. The two sounds do not clash, they overlap, each retaining its character, each shaping the other. In this overlapping space, something new begins to breathe. A generation raised on harmony will soon begin to compose. A nation trained in discipline will soon search for expression. The march and the chant will meet, but that meeting belongs to the next chapter. For now, rest in this moment of structure. Feel the steady pulse of measured rhythm, the calm repetition of classroom song, the steady cadence of footsteps on packed earth. Change does not always arrive. As thunder, sometimes it arrives. As practice, as routine, as a melody sung softly by children at dusk. And as voices fade into evening air, we step forward, not abruptly, but gradually, toward the rise of those who will take these new tools and shape them into something distinctly their own. Part 9. The Rise of Japanese Composers. The steady rhythm of practice had reshaped a generation. Children who once sang school songs now sat at pianos. Students who marched in band formations now studied harmony. The tools had arrived, the discipline had settled, and quietly a question began to form. If we can perform Western music, can we also create it? At first, composition felt like imitation. European forms were studied carefully. Sonatas, symphonies, art songs. Young musicians learned the architecture of sound, how themes develop, how harmonies resolve, how tension rises and releases. It was a different way of thinking, structured, layered, mathematical almost. And yet, within that structure, there was space to shape something new. Among the early pioneers was a composer named Kosaku Yamada. He studied in Europe, absorbing German Romanticism. But when he returned home, he did not simply copy what he had learned. He listened again to Japanese folk melodies, to pentatonic scales, to the subtle bends of traditional song, and slowly he began weaving the two together. Imagine a melody that begins in a Western harmonic frame, but turns gently, unexpectedly, into a Japanese tonal color, a chord progression that moves forward with European logic, yet carries the emotional restraint of Japanese aesthetics. This was not collision, it was conversation. Composers of this era stood at a delicate threshold, too Western, and the music felt detached from home, too traditional, and it seemed disconnected from the modern world. Balance became an art, not dramatic fusion, but careful integration. Concert halls began to appear in cities. Audiences gathered, curious and attentive. They listened to orchestras perform works written by their own countrymen, music that sounded familiar, yet slightly transformed. The piano no longer felt foreign. The violin no longer felt distant. They had become instruments of Japanese expression. There is something intimate about hearing your own culture through a new lens. It is like seeing a childhood landscape illuminated by unfamiliar light. The shapes remain, but the shadows deepen, the contours sharpen, the meaning expands. Some compositions embraced lyricism. Art songs carried poetry in delicate phrases. Others experimented with orchestral texture, strings swelling gently, woodwinds tracing quiet arcs above them. But always there was restraint, a certain spaciousness. Even within Western harmony, silence remained respected. This was not accidental. Japanese aesthetic principles, the space between, continued to guide artistic instinct. Even when writing in symphonic form, composers allowed breath, allowed pause, allowed understatement. Western technique provided structure. Japanese sensibility provided soul. As decades passed, a distinctly modern Japanese sound emerged. It did not reject its influences. It did not deny its origins. It acknowledged both. In this acknowledgement, confidence grew. The question was no longer, can we compose Western music? It became, what is our voice within it? Imagine an evening recital. A pianist bows gently before sitting. The first notes are simple, measured, rooted in tonal harmony. But as the piece unfolds, a melody rises that feels unmistakably Japanese, not through cliché, not through ornament, but through pacing, through emotional restraint, through subtle asymmetry. The audience listens quietly. There is pride, not loud, not boastful, but steady. A recognition that something has shifted. Japan is no longer only absorbing sound, it is shaping it. The rise of Japanese composers marked more than artistic development. It marked cultural confidence, the ability to stand between worlds without dissolving into either, to borrow without losing oneself, to innovate without severing roots. And yet, this was still only the beginning. Beyond the concert hall, new technologies waited, devices that could carry music into homes. Without live performance, new rhythms of urban life were forming. The next transformation would not be about composition alone, but about distribution, about how sound travels. For now, rest in this quiet emergence. The image of a composer at dusk, papers scattered across a wooden desk, a candle flickering. Outside, the distant echo of a temple bell. Inside, the gentle progression of a Western chord. Two histories meeting, not in conflict, but in harmony. And as the final note fades, we turn toward a new chapter, where music leaves the concert hall and enters the airwaves. Part 10. Radio, Records, and Urban Popular Music. The composer sits quietly. A melody written in careful ink rests upon the page. For generations, music had lived in moments like this. A performer, an audience, a single place in time. But the 20th century would change something fundamental. Music would begin to travel. At the turn of the century, a new machine appeared in homes and cafes, the phonograph, a curious device with a spinning disc and a small metal needle. For the first time, sound itself could be captured, not just remembered, not just performed again, but stored. Imagine the experience. A family gathered in a small room, a record placed gently onto the turntable, the needle lowered, and suddenly music fills the air. A singer's voice, recorded perhaps months earlier, now present in the room. Distance disappears. Time bends slightly. For many listeners, this felt almost magical. Records changed more than convenience. They changed how music was shared. Before recordings, music belonged to the place it was performed. After recordings, music could travel far beyond the concert hall. A song recorded in Tokyo might be heard days later in a distant town. At the same time, cities were growing. Tokyo and Osaka expanded rapidly, their streets illuminated by new electric lights. Cafes, theaters, and dance halls began to appear. Urban life created new rhythms, faster, more crowded, more connected. Music began to reflect this new pace. Another invention soon followed: radio, invisible waves, carrying sound through the air. No physical record required, no performer present, only a voice moving across the nation at the speed of light. In the 1920s, radio broadcasting began in Japan. Programs included news, education, and of course, music. Families gathered around wooden receivers as warm vacuum tubes glowed softly inside. From that single box, orchestras played, singers performed, announcers spoke gently into microphones. Radio changed listening habits. Music was no longer something one sought out in a concert hall. It simply arrived into homes, into shops, into quiet evening rooms. And because millions listened at once, a shared musical culture began to form. Out of this new environment emerged a style known as ryukoka, literally popular song. These songs blended influences from many directions: Western harmony, Japanese melodic sensibility, urban emotion. They spoke of love, longing, modern life, and the quiet loneliness sometimes found in crowded cities. Early recording stars became recognizable voices across the country. People who had never met them still knew their songs, still hummed their melodies. For the first time, music created a kind of national conversation. Yet, the sound itself remained uniquely Japanese. Western instruments were present: violins, pianos, trumpets. But the phrasing often retained a certain restraint, a lingering note, a subtle shift in tone. Echoes of traditional aesthetics still lived within these modern songs. Technology had expanded the reach of music, but culture continued to shape its voice. In cafes, young listeners gathered around record players. In homes, families listened quietly to evening broadcasts. Some music encouraged dancing. Other songs invited reflection. And slowly, the idea of the music industry began to take shape. Composers wrote songs, not only for concerts, but for recordings. Singers developed distinctive styles. Producers considered what audiences wanted to hear. Music was no longer only an art. It was also becoming a profession, a business. But history rarely moves in a straight line. As the 1930s progressed, political tensions grew across the world. War would soon reshape daily life in Japan, including its music. Some songs were used to inspire unity. Others faded quietly from public life. The atmosphere of popular music changed. Still, the technologies remained. Records, radio, the ability for sound to travel. When the war finally ended, Japan entered a new era of rebuilding. Cities, scarred by conflict, began slowly to recover, and music, once again, played a role in that recovery. New sounds would soon arrive, new rhythms, new influences from abroad. But the foundations had already been laid. Recording technology, broadcast networks, urban audiences, all of these had transformed music from a local performance into a shared national experience. Picture a quiet night in Tokyo. A radio glows softly on a wooden table. Outside, the city hums gently. Inside, a singer's voice floats through the room. Clear, steady, carried through invisible waves. No stage, no orchestra hall, just a voice moving through the night air. From this moment forward, music would rarely remain in one place. It would travel farther, faster, and reach more listeners than ever before. And in the next chapter, those new sounds would help shape a society learning to stand again after great upheaval. For now, let the gentle hum of the radio fade into the quiet of evening and drift with us toward the music of a rebuilding nation. Part 11. Post-war sound and cultural rebuilding. The radio continues to glow softly in the night. For years, its warm light had carried voices, songs, and quiet companionship into homes across Japan, but the world around it had changed dramatically. Cities had fallen silent, concert halls had closed, and for a time, music itself seemed to hold its breath. When the war ended in 1945, Japan entered a period unlike any before. Buildings stood damaged. Families searched for stability. Entire neighborhoods were beginning again. In moments like these, people often return to the simplest forms of comfort: conversation, food, and music. At first, the sounds that filled the air were quiet ones, simple melodies sung at home, songs remembered from earlier years, music that required no stage, no orchestra, only a human voice. In those fragile months, music became less about performance and more about healing. But history moves forward, even when recovery is slow. As cities were rebuilt, so too were the spaces where music lived. Theaters reopened, dance halls returned, radio stations resumed their broadcasts, and gradually, new sounds began to appear. One of those sounds came from across the ocean: jazz, carried by American soldiers, by records, and by radio broadcasts. For many young listeners, the rhythms felt exciting, unexpected, alive. Jazz moved differently from traditional Japanese music. Its rhythms swung, its harmonies shifted freely. Improvisation allowed musicians to shape each performance in the moment. For a generation growing up after the war, this spontaneity held a special appeal. It felt modern, open, full of possibility. Small jazz cafes began to appear in cities, smoke drifting slowly through dim rooms, a piano in the corner, a trumpet resting beside a music stand. Listeners gathered quietly, sometimes late into the night, as musicians explored this new language of sound. Yet even here, Japanese musicians did not simply imitate. They listened carefully. They absorbed the rhythm, the harmony, the freedom, and gradually they began to blend these elements with their own musical sensibilities. Out of this mixture, a new form of popular music began to grow: post-war karaoke, Japanese popular song. These songs often carried emotional melodies, supported by Western instruments, strings, piano, occasionally brass. But the phrasing remained distinctly Japanese, melancholy, gentle, reflective. For audiences still rebuilding their lives, these songs resonated deeply. They spoke of longing, of separation, of hope returning slowly. Music became a mirror for the emotions of an entire society. Technology also continued to evolve. Records improved, radio broadcasts expanded. Soon, television would join them. Music was no longer limited to one medium. It could appear in many forms, heard on the radio, purchased on vinyl, or performed live on broadcast programs. With each new medium, artists reached larger audiences. Singers became household names. Composers found new opportunities. Music companies began shaping the industry with increasing influence. But behind the growth of entertainment remained something deeper, a quiet, cultural rebuilding. Imagine a small apartment in Tokyo during the early 1950s. Evening settles outside the window. A record spins slowly. From its grooves, a singer's voice emerges, clear, expressive, filled with emotion. For the listener, the song is more than entertainment. It is reassurance, a reminder that life continues. In this way, music helped rebuild more than cities. It helped rebuild confidence, identity, a sense of shared experience. Through melodies carried across radio waves and through records spinning in quiet rooms, a new cultural atmosphere slowly emerged. This atmosphere would soon give birth to entirely new genres: rock, film music, television themes, and eventually the polished urban sound that would later become known as city pop. But those sounds still waited just beyond the horizon. For now, the night remains calm. A jazz trumpet echoes softly down a narrow street. A record spins gently in a living room, and somewhere a radio announcer speaks quietly into a microphone. Japan is rebuilding. Not only its buildings, but its voice. As the final notes of this era fade, a new musical landscape begins to appear. One shaped by cities, cinema, and a generation growing up in a rapidly changing world. And in the next chapter, those sounds will travel even farther, reaching audiences far beyond Japan's shores. After years of rebuilding, streets once quiet at night now glow with light. Neon signs flicker softly. Trains move through the darkness with steady rhythm. And somewhere in an apartment above the street, a record begins to play. By the late 20th century, Japan had entered a new chapter. The economy expanded, cities grew taller, technology became part of everyday life, and music, once carried by radio and vinyl, now moved through an increasingly connected world. The sound of this new era was different. Smoother, polished, urban. This was the atmosphere that would later be known as city pop. City pop did not appear suddenly. It grew slowly from the musical foundations of the post-war years. Western harmony, jazz influence, and Japanese melodic sensibility all continued to blend. But now the music reflected a different mood. The mood of the modern city, late-night drives, ocean highways, apartment windows glowing above quiet streets. City pop often carried a feeling of distance, not sadness, but a gentle sense of reflection. The sound of someone looking out across a city skyline and thinking quietly about life. Synthesizers joined guitars and pianos. Electric bass moved smoothly beneath the melody. Drum machines added steady rhythm. Yet the emotional tone remained restrained. Even at its most polished, Japanese pop music often retained a certain softness, a certain space. At the same time, another form of music was shaping how people experienced sound. Film music. As Japanese cinema reached international audiences, composers began crafting soundtracks that carried deep emotional atmosphere, strings swelling quietly beneath a scene, a piano motif repeating gently, a melody returning at just the right moment. Music in film has a unique power. It guides emotion without speaking. It tells the audience what the silence means. Japanese composers became masters of this subtle art. Their work often balanced simplicity with profound emotional resonance. Soon, another visual medium expanded this influence even further. Animation. What began as domestic entertainment gradually became something much larger. Stories animated with careful detail carried music that listeners would remember for years, sometimes decades. Film and animation soundtracks introduced Japanese music to audiences far beyond the country itself. Listeners who had never visited Japan found themselves moved by these melodies, not because they understood the language, but because the music itself carried emotion clearly. And as the internet slowly connected the world, these sounds traveled even farther. Records once sold only in Tokyo began appearing in distant countries. Old city pop songs found new listeners decades later. Young musicians sampled them, shared them, reimagined them. In a quiet way, Japanese music had become global, not through loud announcements, but through gradual discovery, one listener at a time, one melody at a time. Yet even as Japanese music reached outward, its roots remained visible. The sense of space, the emotional restraint, the careful balance between sound and silence. These qualities, present in temple music centuries earlier, still echoed quietly within modern recordings. This continuity is part of what makes musical history so fascinating. Styles change, technology evolves, instruments come and go, but deeper aesthetic instincts often remain. Imagine a quiet night again, a city skyline illuminated by soft neon light. Inside an apartment, someone listens through headphones, perhaps a city pop record, perhaps a film soundtrack. The music drifts gently into the room. Outside, cars move slowly along distant streets. The city hums softly. And somewhere far away, another listener hears the same melody. Across an ocean, across cultures, connected by sound. From ancient ritual songs to modern recordings shared worldwide, the story of Japanese music is not simply a story of styles. It is a story of listening, of adaptation, of quiet transformation across centuries. And though this chapter closes, the music itself continues, always evolving, always traveling, always carrying echoes of the past into the sounds of tomorrow. For now, let the city lights fade gently into the night and rest in the quiet rhythm of a story still unfolding. The city is quiet tonight. Across the skyline, soft lights glow in scattered windows, while distant streets move slowly through the darkness. somewhere inside those quiet rooms, music is playing, a melody from decades ago, a new song shared through the internet, or perhaps a voice created by lines of code. For centuries, Japanese music has continued to evolve from sacred rituals performed in forest shrines to the refined sounds of imperial courts, from lantern-lit theaters and bustling city streets to the glowing screens of modern computers. Each generation has discovered new ways to create sound, new instruments, new technologies, new voices, and yet, through every change, something familiar has remained. A quiet sense of atmosphere, a careful balance between sound and silence, a feeling that music should leave space for reflection. In this episode, we continue our gentle journey through the history of Japanese music. But this time, we step into the modern digital age, an era shaped by technology, by independent creators, and by global connections that allow music to travel farther than ever before. From the rise of J-pop in Japan's neon-lit cities to the soundtracks of anime and video games heard around the world, from the internet that transformed how songs are shared, to virtual voices, independent artists, and the quiet creativity of musicians working late at night in small rooms. Together, these stories form a new chapter in the long journey of Japanese music. So tonight, as the world grows quiet, let us explore this modern era, a time when melodies can travel across oceans, when a single laptop can become a recording studio, and when the next sound of Japan may already be forming somewhere in the stillness of the night. Part 13. The Rise of J-pop. The city lights remain. High above the streets, neon signs glow softly. Against the night sky, inside apartments and cafes, music continues to play. Sometimes from radios, sometimes from records, and increasingly from small digital players. Resting beside glowing televisions. By the late 20th century, Japan had already built a rich musical landscape. City pop filled urban nights, with polished melodies. Film scores carried emotion. Through cinema halls, and Japanese music had begun reaching listeners far beyond the country's shores. Yet another transformation was quietly beginning. In the 1980s and 1990s, Japan's music industry expanded rapidly. Compact discs replaced vinyl. Music television programs became a central part of popular culture, and record companies began shaping a new form of mainstream music. This new sound would soon be known as J-pop. Unlike earlier eras, J-pop was not defined by a single musical style. Instead, it became a broad cultural space where many influences could meet: rock guitars, electronic synthesizers, dance rhythms, traditional melodic phrasing, all blending together into something distinctly modern. For listeners, the experience of music was also changing. Songs were no longer heard only on the radio or in cafes. They appeared on television, in commercials, and in dramas. A single song could quickly travel across the entire country. This new visibility changed the role of musicians. Artists were no longer only performers. They became cultural figures. Their music accompanied everyday life, playing softly in convenience stores, echoing through shopping streets, or drifting from open car windows late at night. At the same time, technology continued to evolve. Portable music players allowed listeners to carry their favorite songs anywhere. A quiet train ride could now include a private soundtrack. Headphones created small worlds of sound within crowded cities. Music became both shared and deeply personal. The songwriting of the J-pop era often reflected this new urban life. Lyrics spoke of relationships, city evenings, train stations, and fleeting moments of emotion. The melodies remained memorable, but rarely overwhelming. Even within modern pop production, a certain restraint persisted, a subtle emotional balance that had long been part of Japanese musical expression. Many artists contributed to shaping the early sound of J-pop. Some emerged from rock bands, others from television programs, still others from the world of songwriting and production. Together, they created a musical environment that felt energetic, modern, and unmistakably Japanese. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of J-pop was how easily it connected with other forms of media: television dramas, commercials, animation, music, and storytelling began intertwining more closely. than ever before. A theme song could define an entire television series. A melody could instantly recall a particular scene, a particular character, or a moment shared by millions of viewers. In this way, J-pop became more than music. It became part of everyday memory. Songs marked seasons of life, graduations, late-night conversations, long train rides home. A melody could bring back an entire era. Yet, despite its modern sound, J-pop still carried echoes of earlier musical traditions, the careful pacing of melody, the emotional subtlety, the sense that music should leave space for reflection. Even within synthesizers and electric guitars, those older instincts remained. As the 20th century drew to a close, Japanese music had reached another turning point. Technology, media, and culture were now closely intertwined, and the sound of Japan continued evolving. But new forms of storytelling were already preparing to reshape music once again. Animated worlds, video games, digital spaces where sound and image would merge in entirely new ways. These developments would soon introduce Japanese music to a global audience in ways never imagined before. For now, imagine the quiet interior of a late-night train. Passengers sit silently as the city slides past the windows. Through a pair of headphones, a J-pop song begins. Soft synthesizers, a clear voice, a melody that feels both modern and strangely familiar. Outside, the lights of Tokyo stretch endlessly into the night. Inside, music continues its long journey. From ancient ritual to modern rhythm, carrying with it centuries of memory within every note. And in the next chapter, those sounds will travel even farther through animation, games, and digital worlds shared across the globe. Part 13. The Rise of J-pop. The city lights remain. High above the streets, neon signs glow softly. Against the night sky, inside apartments and cafes, music continues to play. Sometimes from radios, sometimes from records, and increasingly from small digital players. Resting beside glowing televisions. By the late 20th century, Japan had already built a rich musical landscape. City pop filled urban nights with polished melodies. Film scores carried emotion. Through cinema halls and Japanese music had begun reaching listeners far beyond the country's shores. Yet another transformation was quietly beginning. In the 1980s and 1990s, Japan's music industry expanded rapidly. Compact discs replaced vinyl. Music television programs became a central part of popular culture, and record companies began shaping a new form of mainstream music. This new sound would soon be known as J-pop. Unlike earlier eras, J-pop was not defined by a single musical style. Instead, it became a broad cultural space where many influences could meet: rock guitars, electronic synthesizers, dance rhythms, traditional melodic phrasing, all blending together into something distinctly modern. For listeners, the experience of music was also changing. Songs were no longer heard only on the radio or in cafes. They appeared on television, in commercials, and in dramas. A single song could quickly travel across the entire country. This new visibility changed the role of musicians. Artists were no longer only performers. They became cultural figures. Their music accompanied everyday life, playing softly in convenience stores, echoing through shopping streets, or drifting from open car windows late at night. At the same time, technology continued to evolve. Portable music players allowed listeners to carry their favorite songs anywhere. A quiet train ride could now include a private soundtrack. Headphones created small worlds of sound within crowded cities. Music became both shared and deeply personal. The songwriting of the J-pop era often reflected this new urban life. Lyrics spoke of relationships, city evenings, train stations, and fleeting moments of emotion. The melodies remained memorable, but rarely overwhelming. Even within modern pop production, a certain restraint persisted, a subtle emotional balance that had long been part of Japanese musical expression. Many artists contributed to shaping the early sound of J-pop. Some emerged from rock bands, others from television programs, still others from the world of songwriting and production. Together, they created a musical environment that felt energetic, modern, and unmistakably Japanese. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of J-pop was how easily it connected with other forms of media: television dramas, commercials, animation, music, and storytelling began intertwining more closely than ever before. A theme song could define an entire television series. A melody could instantly recall a particular scene, a particular character, or a moment shared by millions of viewers. In this way, J-pop became more than music. It became part of everyday memory. Songs marked seasons of life, graduations, late-night conversations, long train rides home. A melody could bring back an entire era. Yet, despite its modern sound, J-pop still carried echoes of earlier musical traditions, the careful pacing of melody, the emotional subtlety, the sense that music should leave space for reflection. Even within synthesizers and electric guitars, those older instincts remained. As the 20th century drew to a close, Japanese music had reached another turning point. Technology, media, and culture were now closely intertwined, and the sound of Japan continued evolving. But new forms of storytelling were already preparing to reshape music once again. Animated worlds, video games, digital spaces where sound and image would merge. In entirely new ways, these developments would soon introduce Japanese music to a global audience in ways never imagined before. For now, imagine the quiet interior of a late-night train. Passengers sit silently as the city slides past the windows. Through a pair of headphones, a J-pop song begins. Soft synthesizers, a clear voice, a melody that feels both modern and strangely familiar. Outside, the lights of Tokyo stretch endlessly into the night. Inside, music continues its long journey. From ancient ritual to modern rhythm, carrying with it centuries of memory within every note. And in the next chapter, those sounds will travel even farther through animation, games, and digital worlds shared across the globe. Part 15: The Internet and the Digital Music Era. The night continues quietly. Across the city, soft lights remain. Inside countless rooms, some windows glow faintly. Above, silent streets. Inside those rooms, small screens illuminate the darkness. Computers hum softly. On wooden desks, headphones rest nearby. And music, once again, finds new ways to travel. By the end of the 20th century, Japan's musical landscape had already changed many times. From ancient ritual chants performed in quiet shrines to court music, echoing through imperial halls from the refined silence of no theater to the vibrant streets of the Edo period, from early recordings on vinyl and cassette to the polished sounds of J-pop. Each era had reshaped how music was created and heard. But as the new millennium approached, another transformation began to unfold. This change did not happen in concert halls or recording studios. Instead, it appeared quietly inside homes through computer screens connected to a vast new network, the Internet. At first, the idea seemed simple, a digital space where information could move quickly from one place to another. But soon, music began, traveling through these same pathways. Songs, once distributed through physical media, could now be shared as digital files. Small recordings moved silently across invisible networks. A melody created in a bedroom in Tokyo could appear within moments on a computer in another country. For musicians, this shift was extraordinary. In earlier decades, releasing music required the support of record companies, studios, physical production, distribution. But now, new possibilities began to emerge. Artists could record their music at home. Simple software allowed melodies, voices, and instruments to be layered together. A quiet room could become a recording studio, and once the music was complete, it could travel almost anywhere. Online platforms slowly appeared. Early websites hosted recordings shared by independent artists. Listeners explored these digital spaces late at night, discovering new sounds. One song at a time, communities began to form. Small groups of listeners who shared a common curiosity about music. Some artists experimented with entirely new styles, electronic sounds, ambient textures, soft rhythms designed to accompany long hours of quiet listening. Other musicians blended traditional elements with modern production, a koto melody floating above digital beats, a shakuhachi flute echoing through electronic atmospheres. The boundaries between old and new began to blur. Listeners themselves also changed their relationship with music. Portable digital players became increasingly common. Instead of carrying a few albums, people could now carry entire collections in their pockets. A train ride through Tokyo might include a personal soundtrack, soft melodies accompanying the passing lights outside the window. Music became more private and more personal than ever before. Yet at the same time, it also became more shared. Online forums allowed listeners to discuss songs, artists, and memories. A track released by an independent musician could slowly gain attention through word of mouth. A quiet recording made in a small room might travel across the world. Some artists who began online eventually found larger audiences. Others remained within smaller communities, creating music for listeners who appreciated subtlety and atmosphere. In many ways, this era felt calmer than the fast-paced pop industry that existed before it, without the pressure of large commercial systems. Some musicians experimented freely. Slow melodies, gentle soundscapes, minimal compositions designed not to overwhelm the listener, but to accompany. Quiet moments, late evenings, long walks, night trains, moving silently through the city. Technology continued to evolve. Streaming services began replacing downloads. Music libraries expanded endlessly. Listeners could explore entire worlds of sound with only a few clicks. For the first time, the full history of Japanese music became easily accessible. Ancient court music, traditional folk songs, jazz recordings from the early 20th century, city pop from the 1980s, modern electronic music created only weeks before, all existing together within the same digital space. The past and the present became neighbors. Yet, despite this enormous change, some aspects of Japanese music remained surprisingly constant. The careful pacing of melody, the quiet balance between emotion and restraint, the feeling that music should leave room for reflection. These qualities had existed for centuries, and even within the endless flow of digital sound, they continued to appear. A soft piano piece shared online, a gentle electronic track circulating quietly among listeners, a melody discovered late at night, heard through headphones in a silent room. In this way, the internet did not erase the past. Instead, it became another pathway through which music could travel. Ancient traditions, modern experiments, and personal creations, all moving together through invisible networks. Imagine once more a quiet apartment, late in the evening, a small desk, a glowing computer screen. Outside the window, the city continues its endless rhythm. Cars move slowly through distant streets. Neon signs flicker softly against the night sky. Inside, a listener presses play. A new song begins, perhaps created only days before, perhaps inspired by melodies centuries old. In the quiet space between notes, time itself seems to blur, past and present, gently overlapping. And somewhere within that quiet sound, the long story of Japanese music continues. Part 16, Vocaloid and the Age of Virtual Voices. The city is quiet again. Late at night, small lights glow. Inside countless rooms, some come from desk lamps, others from computer screens, softly illuminating the darkness. In these quiet spaces, something new begins to take shape. A melody written on a keyboard, a rhythm arranged on a screen, and sometimes a voice that does not belong to any human singer. By the early years of the 21st century, Japan's musical landscape had already been transformed many times, from ancient ritual chants performed in forest shrines to court music echoing through imperial halls, from theater stages to bustling city streets, from vinyl records to compact discs, and finally to digital files shared through the internet. Yet, even within this rapidly changing world, another unexpected chapter was about to begin. This new chapter did not begin in a recording studio or on a concert stage. Instead, it began inside computers. In 2007, a new musical tool appeared in Japan. It was called Vocaloid. At first glance, Vocaloid was simply a type of software, but its purpose was unusual. Rather than recording a human singer, the program allowed users to create a voice digitally by typing lyrics and arranging melodies. A synthetic voice could sing the song. The result was neither entirely human nor entirely mechanical. It was something strangely new. At the same time, a character appeared alongside this technology. Her name was Hatsune Miku. With turquoise hair and a futuristic design, she became the visual symbol of this new musical world. But the most important change was not the character herself. It was the idea behind the technology. For the first time, anyone with a computer could create a singing voice. Music production, which once required professional studios and trained vocalists, suddenly became accessible to individuals working alone in quiet rooms. Some creators were students, others were hobbyists. Many had never released music before. Yet, with simple software and a personal computer, they began composing songs late at night. Melodies were shared through online platforms. Listeners discovered new tracks through digital communities. One website, in particular, became closely connected to this emerging culture. Nico Duga, this Japanese video platform, allowed creators to upload music videos and animations. Viewers could watch and listen together, while comments flowed across the screen. The experience felt communal, even though each listener sat alone in front of a computer. Through this space, Vocaloid music spread quickly. Some songs became enormously popular. They were remixed, reinterpreted, and performed again by other creators. In this way, music became a shared collaboration not limited to one composer or one performer. A melody written by one person could inspire another artist to create an entirely new version. Visual artists added illustrations, animators created music videos, producers remixed the sound. Gradually, a vast creative network formed. Thousands of individuals contributing to the same evolving musical culture. For many listeners, this world felt different from traditional pop music. Instead of distant celebrities, the creators felt approachable. They were people working quietly in ordinary rooms. Their songs often reflected personal emotions, late-night thoughts, quiet loneliness, small moments of happiness. The music itself also explored many different styles, electronic dance rhythms, soft piano melodies, rock guitars, ambient soundscapes. Each creator experimented freely without the expectations of large record companies. Yet, even within these digital sounds, something familiar remained. The emotional restraint often found in earlier Japanese music. Melodies that moved gently, lyrics that suggested rather than declared, moments of silence between phrases. In this way, even a synthetic voice could carry a surprisingly human feeling. Over time, some Vocaloid songs reached enormous audiences, concert halls filled with listeners, but the singer on stage was not a human performer. Instead, a digital character appeared as light projected into space. Hatsune Miku performed as a holographic figure while live musicians played instruments beside her. For audiences, this experience felt both familiar and futuristic, a concert where the voice came from software, yet the emotional response remained deeply real. By this time, Japanese music had traveled far from its ancient beginnings, from sacred ritual to digital creation, from temple courtyards to computer screens. And yet, the essence of music remained unchanged, a desire to share feeling through sound, a quiet connection between listener and melody. Imagine once more a late evening in a small apartment. Outside, the city moves slowly through the night. Inside, a computer screen glows in the darkness. On the screen, a simple program displays musical notes, a few keystrokes, a short melody, and suddenly, a voice begins to sing. Not a voice recorded in a studio, but a voice generated by lines of code. In that moment, technology and creativity become inseparable. The boundaries between artist and audience begin to blur, and somewhere in the quiet space between human imagination and digital sound, a new chapter of Japanese music continues to unfold. Part 17: Independent Artists and the New Sound of Japan. The night grows deeper across the city. Most windows have gone dark. Only a few lights remain, glowing quietly above silent streets. In small rooms, soft music continues. A computer hums gently. Headphones rest beside a keyboard, and somewhere a new melody begins to form. By the early years of the 21st century, Japanese music had entered a new era. Technology had already transformed how songs were recorded, shared, and discovered. The internet had opened pathways that connected listeners across great distances, and digital tools allowed almost anyone to create music from their own home. Yet another quiet shift was beginning. This change did not come from large studios or major record labels. Instead, it came from individual creators, independent artists, musicians, working alone, late at night, experimenting with sound, in small personal spaces. In earlier decades, becoming a musician often required a connection to the music industry. Record companies, selected performers, producers guided their sound. Albums were distributed through stores and broadcast media. But the digital world slowly changed. This structure, recording equipment, became smaller. Software became easier to use, and online platforms gave artists a place to share their work. For many musicians, this meant something entirely new. They could create music without waiting for permission. A song written in a bedroom could be uploaded to the internet within minutes. Listeners on the other side of the world might discover it the very same night. Websites such as SoundCloud, YouTube, and other platforms became gathering places for these independent creators. Each artist experimented with their own style. Some recorded gentle piano pieces. Others layered electronic beats with quiet vocals. Some blended traditional instruments with modern production, a shakuhachi melody floating through, digital reverberation, a koto phrase woven into soft electronic rhythms. These sounds did not always follow the expectations of commercial music. Instead, they reflected personal expression, late-night creativity, private emotion, a quiet search for new musical language. Listeners responded to this authenticity. The internet allowed people to explore music in a new way. Instead of hearing only the artists promoted by large labels, they could discover thousands of smaller voices, hidden songs, shared quietly between communities, music created, not for fame, but simply for the joy of creation. Some artists recorded their work entirely alone. Others collaborated across great distances. A composer in Tokyo might share files with a vocalist in another country. Together, they built songs through digital communication. The idea of a musical scene also began to change. Instead of gathering in one physical place, communities formed online. Forums, comment sections, and collaborative projects connected creators who had never met face to face. Yet, despite this new technology, many qualities of Japanese music remained familiar. The sense of quiet atmosphere, the careful pacing of melody, the subtle emotional tone that allowed music to feel reflective rather than overwhelming. Even within electronic sound and modern production, these older instincts still appeared. For some artists, the goal was not to fill stadiums or dominate the charts. Instead, they created music for smaller audiences, listeners seeking calm soundscapes, gentle melodies, or thoughtful compositions. In this way, independent music often felt closer to the listener. A song might accompany a quiet evening walk, a long train ride through the city, or the stillness of a late-night room. Imagine once more a small apartment overlooking the city. Outside, distant lights shimmer across the horizon. Inside, a musician sits before a computer screen. On the desk, a MIDI keyboard, a pair of headphones, and a simple microphone. The room is silent except for the soft tapping of keys. A melody grows slowly. Layer by layer, the sound expands. There is no audience in the room, no stage, no applause, only the quiet act of creation. Yet, somewhere, far beyond the walls of that small space, a listener will eventually hear the music. Through cables, servers, and invisible networks, the sound will travel across the world. And in that moment, two strangers will share the same melody across distance, across time, across the quiet spaces between cities. Japanese music, once shaped by courts, temples, and grand concert halls, now continues its journey through countless individual voices, each one small, each one unique, yet together forming a vast and evolving musical landscape. And as the night grows still, those quiet sounds continue to echo through the digital world, carried gently from one room to another, from one listener to the next, like distant lights glowing softly across the sleeping city. Part 18. The Endless Journey of Japanese Music. The night is quiet. Across the city, most lights have already faded. Only a few windows still glow softly against the dark sky. Somewhere in those quiet rooms, music continues. A gentle melody drifts through the air, barely louder than the hum of the night. For centuries, Japanese music has followed a long and winding path. It began in forests and sacred spaces where ritual sounds echoed through trees and ancient shrines. Voices rose toward the sky in ceremonies meant to connect humans with the unseen world. Later, music moved into imperial courts, elegant instruments, and carefully composed melodies filled vast halls with slow and deliberate sound. Each note placed with care, each silence as meaningful as the sound itself. Over time, music traveled beyond palace walls. It entered the streets, the theaters, and the everyday life of ordinary people. Traveling performers carried songs between towns. Theaters brought stories to life through music and movement. Instruments like the shamisen became familiar voices in cities filled with lantern light. Centuries passed, new ideas arrived: Western harmony, military bands, school songs, and orchestras slowly blended with older traditions. Japanese composers began shaping a modern musical language, one that balanced structure and subtlety, emotion and restraint. Then came radio, records, television. The sound of Japan began traveling farther than ever before. Songs filled urban nights. Film music echoed through theaters. City pop melodies floated through neon streets and late-night highways. Japanese music was no longer confined to a single place. It was becoming part of a global conversation. In the digital age, another transformation quietly unfolded. The internet allowed music to move freely across borders. A song written in a small room could reach listeners on the other side of the world. New technologies appeared: synthetic voices, virtual performers, independent artists creating music late at night with nothing more than a computer and a quiet space. The tools changed, the platforms changed, but something deeper remained the same: the desire to express feeling through sound, to share a moment of emotion with someone who might be far away. Music has always been a bridge between people, between places, between moments in time. A melody written hundreds of years ago can still be heard today A song created tonight may travel into the future, and somewhere, someone will listen. Imagine once more a quiet evening in Japan. Outside, the city rests beneath a calm sky. Lights stretch across distant buildings. A train moves slowly through the darkness. Inside a small room, a desk lamp glows. On the desk lie many objects, old sheet music, gently worn by time. A cassette tape from decades past, a compact disc, a MIDI keyboard, and a laptop screen displaying digital notes. Each object belongs to a different era, yet all of them tell the same story, the long journey of music from sacred ritual to digital creation, from temple courtyards to glowing computer screens. Japanese music has never stood still. It continues to change, to adapt, to grow. New artists are already composing the sounds of tomorrow. New technologies will reshape how music is created and shared. But the heart of music remains simple, a melody, a rhythm, a quiet expression of human feeling. And perhaps somewhere right now in a quiet room similar to this one, a musician is beginning to write a new song, a melody no one has heard before, a sound that may one day become part of this long story, the story of Japanese music. For now, the night grows deeper, the city grows still, and somewhere in the quiet darkness, a soft melody begins to play, a small sound in a vast world, carrying forward the endless journey of music